I think maturity is like a very simple way of saying it, right? It's like actually building up these foundational layers of saying like, hey, I am my own individual self. I love myself. I will do things for myself that make me happy. This partner isn't here to make me happy. I think that's the first thing you should always remember. Your partner isn't there to make you happy. You are there to make yourself happy. Your partner is there to complement your life, to add an additional lens to your life, additional flavor, so to speak. But it's not like you're supposed to go hungry without a partner. It shouldn't be that kind of like savage, raw desire, but rather it's something that will add to your life, that will make your life more rich and more whole. Hello guys, today we are here for our very first podcast together with Priya. We've been thinking about this a lot, and we've been thinking about how to really give everyone a very good understanding, I guess, of very important concepts in everyday life and try to understand them from different perspectives and points of view. I think it's very common that we end up in situations where, yes, we might think we understand someone else's perspective, but when we actually fall into different situations, like especially, today's topic, relationships and dating, it's very easy for us to try to jump in and essentially extrapolate whatever we believe about the world to our partner. And I think conversations like this can really give us a lot of clarity about all the different ways you could be seeing a relationship from different perspectives, right? I think I have a very different perspective than what Priya has gone through herself and experienced. But I think through our individual experiences, we've actually found some pretty interesting universal principles that will help us hopefully with our future relationships and hopefully help you, the viewer, with yours as well. Maybe we can get a quick intro from you, Priya. Like, tell us a bit about yourself and what interests you about the world of relationships.
Okay, hi guys. I think one good, how the podcast came about is because I feel like me and Conrad are very similar people and we think in a similar way. So even though we were brought up in different cultures, when we meet, there's a lot of things that is actually, it's universal. And I think I saw it while conversing with him, and that's why we are like, okay, let's do a podcast out of it. So just a short intro about me. I'm an engineer by paper, but I'm currently an educator. So I have had experiences in the science line. And other than that, I'm 29 years old, and with respect to the dating scene, I think for the past 3 years, I have been dating, and I've had experiences from I would say pretty young age, like from 23 to 29.
It's actually a very unique experience. I think you're gonna be surprised. I mean, I don't know, I was surprised.
It's not the norm. It's not the normal thing, So I think that has given me the perspective as well to understand other people and how relationships work. So I think it's a blessing that you go through certain things in life and you're able to learn from them and also apply it for your own, and also try to correlate with your friends' relationships, with your parents' relationships, with everybody's relationships, and you just want to understand what is actually happening in this very important topic that everyone is talking about. Talking about my parents, my mom got married when she was 18 and my dad was 21.
Wow.
So comparing to their experience, my mom is 56 and my dad is 63 now. So I've always seen their relationship as a very successful one because they have gone through, of course, a very long marriage, and also they were doing long distance. And I've tried to project that on myself and be okay, you know what, I can also do it. And theirs was an arranged marriage. So again, I think we'll come to that later. So I think, so what I've learned through all this is what Conrad said correctly, that it's not a one rule fits all. It really depends on how you are. So whatever we share here is also, certain things might be applicable to you, certain things might not, and it's okay because everyone of us are different. And that is something that I think I've learned professionally as well, because when I did client services for a couple of years, I realized that I love to mirror my client, and even currently my students, I always mirror them. So it's the same for everything. When it comes to relationship advice or even taking advice, it depends on what level they are, and then you try to tell them. It doesn't mean that if they are in a lower understanding level according to you means they are lower than you. That's not the thing that we are trying to explain here. It's more of their life experiences define their level of thinking, and it's basically their perspective. So if we are able to analyze that, I think most of the problems will be solved, and you can just take what is applicable to you. Yeah, agree.
Yeah. Well, I think like specifically how I think we're going to make the format of these episodes, and I really think it's going to be a radically different way than how people normally consume content online, because again, everyone claims to have a magic answer to something. Everyone claims that, hey, do this thing, you'll be successful, be rich, you'll be happy, you'll have the marriage of your dreams. But actually, I'm going to counter that. I'm going to say, this is not the podcast for that. We're not going to give you a magic tool to unlock everything. What we will give you, however, is something for you to understand where you're at in your understanding of certain topic, in this case, relationships, right? Even myself and Priya might have different understandings on it and different levels of thinking about it. But what we're going to do is we're going to help you break down and understand that to the fullest degree, so that you understand, hey, this is what I need right now to succeed in where I'm at. And this is where I could go in the future if I decide to think about it a bit differently. But like Priya says, there's no kind of hierarchy to this. It's like, you are what your accumulation of experiences are. You are what you hear online. You hear what you study. And ideally, what we're just giving you is more things to understand about yourself, so that you know that, hey, specifically in this situation, this is how you could potentially, react to situations that are being ahead of you. Because as we were going to share soon, there's like many of our situations that we've gone through, we didn't know how to deal with at the beginning. We just reacted, and perhaps now looking back, not the way that we would do it today, but we had no other choice. That's the way we had to react. We didn't know any better, right? So also, there's no shame in not knowing. There's no shame in like doing things, in a suboptimal way. We don't want you to walk away after hearing us talk thinking like, oh, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? Why didn't I just say that? Why didn't I just think that? No, that's not the idea. The idea is that you respect and you're empathetic to yourself on where you were, right? And now you know what to do for the future. And I think that's a beautiful kind of realization for me. It's really a way to self-love myself, right? Yes. Where it's like, I don't need to be so hard on myself, right? That was old me, and new me hopefully is a bit better.
I love that. And one line that I really picked up on and I love is that your perception is your reality. So my perception is my reality. But if I have the awareness to tweak my reality, why not, right? It can be better. Yeah. If I have my awareness, like, okay, this can happen through experiences, shared experiences. My reality can be a bit like more, I would say, more wiser,
Sure.
Yeah. So I think that is how I look at it.
Yeah.
So we are not here to like say you should think this way and all that. We appreciate your perspective. We totally want to hear about that as well. So
let us know down in the comments. Yeah. Yes. We'd love to hear about anything that you
because you might think differently, right, from us.
Yeah, certainly. So I think what would be very cool, Priya, is I think we can kind of go through the progressions of different relationships we've had in our lives. And relationships, obviously, like let's focus on the romantic sense. I think we'll have much more to talk about, even in regards to like friends, family, and so on.
Colleagues.
But I want to kind of focus in on, our own personal journeys. And perhaps what I'll do is I'll talk a bit about some of my experiences and we'll talk about how I matured over time as well, like what I thought then and how it moved on. But I would love for you to jump in whenever you feel like you have something that you want to share that is relevant to that experience, right? So if I'm talking about an experience I had when I was, in the phase of trying to control my life and those kind of things, let me know if you have a similar experience where, whether it be a full-on romantic, relationship or even just a crush, something like that. I think it would be very interesting for our viewers to see the difference in understanding at that point. So I think for me, like I went through a lot of cycles of going into relationships where I thought it was going to be everything I wanted, right? Realizing that it's not 6 to 9 months in, getting really sad about that, trying to make it work certainly, because when you say you want to break up, their party's always going to be like, no, don't break up, maybe there's something here, I'll be different, I'll do different things. And at the time, your ego is satisfied because you're like, oh, I must be right if someone wants to change themselves so much for me. But ultimately, that's not the answer. No one will change for you, and that's not a realistic change, first of all, but ultimately, it's not sustainable change. And on top of that, when they do change for you, ultimately, do you even know what you want? Are those things actually the things that's gonna make you happy? Because what I found, which is very funny, was that, even after they might have changed, I find something else to nitpick on. I find something else to be sad about. And that just means that I don't love myself enough. So the next stage after that, like typically is you start trying to find like a way to systematize your dating, right? You try to have a checklist. These are all the things I want from a partner. These are all the things I don't want. And I think at that stage, it's very interesting because it just becomes a checklist, right? A lot of people see on dating apps, oh, if you're not 6 foot, I'm not going to date you. Right? If you're not, this weight, if you're not this religion, if you're not this thing, whatever. And ultimately, it's coming from a lot of built-up experience, certainly, about like, hey, these are things I think I want, and these are indicators of what I think a good relationship is going to be like, right? Oh, maybe if they follow the same religion, maybe if they follow the same, their same ethnic, as me, or ethnicity as me, rather.
Like what's a fit for you?
Yeah, and then you're like trying to figure out your fit, and then you try to go through this, checklist, and you're telling everybody, like, hey, as long as they fulfill these criteria, we're good. It becomes almost like I heard this really amazing thing on another podcast recently, where it's like, checklists and all these things, like, yes, they're useful, but only to a degree. Like, ultimately, you still need to feel a connection with someone. And I think what happens is we tend to mix up the kind of, we tend to mix up the signals. So let me explain this a bit. And I actually would love to jump over to you and kind of get your take on this, because we're going to touch into a topic I think you're very familiar with, where arranged marriages, right? They literally have criteria, I think 11, 12 criteria that you're kind of looking on. And if you have over a certain number, then great, you're a match, and just go work it out, right? Anything that doesn't work out, you're destined to be, so just work it out. And so I thought that was very interesting, because on one hand, they have systematized dating, they have systematized this process, and I'm all for systematization. If you know me at all, you know that I care a lot about building systems, automating stuff so that, you don't have to repeat the same work again and again, and ideally you're improving from each iteration. So I went through that phase. I was like, hey, this is my initial set of criteria. Then every time I dated someone new and it didn't work out, perhaps, I'll update my criteria. This is what I now want. This is what I now want. And I think what this solves is that a lot of people flip-flop, right? People flip-flop between extremes. They're like, oh, my past ex was like this. I'm going to go full extreme. I'm going to do this one. And then that's also not good. And they just keep flip-flopping until, they realize someday that, oh, I just need to make small tweaks, not like huge tweaks, right? Not huge pivots. But ultimately, though, what I'm about to say is that what I think, and the next step beyond systematizing a relationship, and again, we'll go into detail into each of these stages of relationships, by the way, I think it's very interesting, but the next step after that is actually finding someone that you will find a reason to always, continuously work on the relationship. There is no perfect relationship, even if it's a system, even if you have every criteria hit. Let's say you have, 11 out of 12 things that, are compatible, so to speak. That doesn't mean you guys aren't human. That doesn't mean you guys aren't going to have bad days. Doesn't mean you guys aren't going to argue some days and have good days where you guys have no issue, right? And the important thing is, are you able to recognize that this person in front of you is the person you're going to spend a very big part of your life with, right? And how much effort are you willing to put in to make sure that it works even when it's not working, right? Because not every day is going to be perfect. And on the bad days, how do you make sure you work together to actually make the relationship work? And some people rely on like infatuation love to do this. Some people say, hey, I really love her. I really feel this intense, bond with her. Well, yes, but then what happens 20 years, 30 years later where that spark has gone? Are you still going to be as dedicated to work on your relationship? And we see the divorce rate will tell us no, right? You're like, there's something more interesting outside. I see, people getting younger every day, and then I get a lot of different stimulation. And I think that's a bit negative, right, to think about it that way. Then you have the arranged marriage perspective where it's like, hey, your whole family, your whole relative, your whole circle, your community is going to be sad, right, or devastated if you break up and if you get divorced. Don't get divorced, right? Just work on it. It's for the family, it's for the community. And again, does that make you happy? Maybe not, right? Because again, you're doing it because of an external factor. So what is that intrinsic factor that you can build in to say, hey, I decide to be committed to this person because I think that's what's going to be the best for me. I'm not doing it for them. It's not that I'm not cheating for them. I'm not cheating for myself. I'm not breaking up, not for them, but for myself. I decide that this is something I want to do, and I'm going to push for it, and I'm going to make sure that this is the best damn relationship I'm going to have. And I think that's like kind of, a later stage relationship, which I see like it's the agape love, I feel, that a lot of amazing couples that I've come across recently in their 60s or 70s or 80s, they're just as passionate and as committed to their relationship as they were when they're in their 20s. And we can also dive into that and explain how that is. But I think I've talked a lot. I would love for Priya to share your experience with it, but That's a bit of my rundown of how I kind of graduated through different stages of relationships.
I think that was very clearly and beautifully put, Conrad. So I think we have spoke a lot about this as well. So for me, it's kind of different. Like all my high school crushes, of course I had crushes and stuff, are not, I did not have a relationship because I was brought up like in a community-based environment, and like I mentioned, like my parents had an arranged marriage. So since young, I was told that I have to marry within the caste. And even though I was brought up in Singapore, and I did have two thoughts about it, but since I was only like exposed to that kind of community since young, I thought, okay, so this is my home, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of knew it. So in my head, I had one of my values I had then, based on my perspective then, was to not date if I'm not going to marry the person, because I felt like, you know, because I was in uni and I was doing exchange programs and all of this, so I felt like just focus on these things. And when it comes to the dating scene, when I like someone, when I know, it's very slim chance you'll find someone in the same community that you actually like. So I don't really like pursue it, and I just put a full stop there. So that's why at the age of 23, I did go ahead with the arranged marriage concept. But of course, it was more of based on my experiences then, which means I had zero relationship experience based on that, but also like based on what my parents said. And I did have certain criteria, and my criteria was that he should have been brought up in Singapore, because my perspective then was it would be easier for me to like know the person if we have a similar background. But now, of course, it's different. But at the age of 23, I felt, okay, fine, if we are doing this, just show me the guys who have been brought up in Singapore and in the caste. So the pool was really small, and I met my ex like partner through that, and we did try our best to make things work, of course, because it's a marriage, but it didn't, because we are just two different people. So I think what I did was all the mistakes that you said as well. Like it was a very toxic relationship on my end. Like I expected a lot of things. So I put all my expectations on this one person, because I didn't know. Like I felt I've always been this girl who watched a lot of Bollywood movies and, you know, a lot of Indian movies where you see that perfect fairy tale, right? So I've been that person, and I'm a very expressive person as well. Like I'm not a very I wouldn't say just extroverted, but I'm a very expressive and passionate person. So I wanted to do all of that, and I wanted that person to reciprocate that and do all of that, which is now when I think about it, I was being immature, and it is not the right thing to do. So I do know that it was really difficult on the other person as well. So when I reflected after the whole marriage, and of course we go through the cycle of like denial, and then you go through the cycle of like grieving, and then you finally are like, okay, now I need to know what's wrong with me, right? So I did reflect, and I think what I understood is there was a lot of expectations. I think that's what you mentioned as well, like in your initial relationships, right?
What was your expectation, if you don't mind me asking? Like, I'm very curious.
Like my expectations were, I wanted him, like I did not appreciate the person for who he was. I wanted someone else, like in my head, like someone, it can sound very childish in a way, but now I don't mind sharing it, because I feel like I don't know who will relate to it, right?
Yeah,
so at that point, I was a very like I said, we like to call like more expressive on social media, and he was a very quiet person. So when we go on holidays and stuff, I'll be like, can you help me take photos? And he's not a photo taking person. So these things used to irritate me. But now when I think about it, it sounds very small, but those things were the things that I expected of him to do. Because I was like, okay, if you are my partner, if you are my husband, because I want this, you know, I was trying to change him to the person that I want.
Yes.
Because when I first met him, if I knew that he's a different personality, and I knew that I can't work with it, and that comes from experiences, right? I should not have proceeded with it, but again, due to other extrinsic factors, it happened. But it became a thing where, okay, now that this has happened, now I'm going to mold you to the person I like. And the molding happened for quite a long time, until he was like, this is not me. And it's only fair, right? And then I think the whole thing happened. So this is just my point of view. So with all due respect to him, so this is what I've experienced through that. So I think that is because I would say that in my childhood, as I've seen my parents together, but then they always had long distance. So I think that was another reason I never really knew what a realistic relationship will be like. Because every time my dad came back, it was only like for a very short period. He was away for almost 20 years of my life. So of course he comes back a few times a year, but he had always been just for a few weeks and he goes back to work. Or if not, my mom goes there. So I've never seen a realistic thing. So because I've always seen that they're together, right?
So you see like happy lovey-dovey, you know, been a while since they've seen each other, like very little conflicts, that kind of thing.
I mean, I do know that there were conflicts at home, but it never really, I think it never really got ingrained that this is marriage. It felt more of like, I was very ignorant about it.
I see.
Maybe it's the last child thing. So yeah, I was very focused on doing my own thing. So yeah. And okay, so after the marriage ended, I started to date, and I think the dating experience were even more like rich for me, because I think I needed those experiences for me to now understand that what I actually don't want. Because I think I recently mentioned in a conversation also, like I know what I don't want more than what I want based on all these experiences. So if you ask me now, so what do you want? Like give me a checklist. I have a checklist. I do have it, because we go through that. I'm like, I want this, I want that. But actually, when I see someone, I don't really refer to a checklist. This is just me to see, okay, you know, but I know what I don't want. And I think that is what dating have taught me, because I believe that as empathetic we can be, at the end of the day, we can still choose the person that we want to be with.
Sure.
And I think when we do it, it's okay to be kind to ourselves. And that's where self-love comes in. And the more I love myself, the more I realize that it's about me, you know, it's not about the other person. So I think being an empathetic person, I used to also think when I was dating that the other person's needs or their reasons are more important. They're like, okay, they probably can't do this at this stage of their life because they're busy. And it's just me. I naturally feel like, okay, I understand. But am I actually, is that what I want? So when I start looking inward, I realize I'm also more confident, and I kind of give out that aura. And you don't need a checklist, you know, like I believe that your aura will naturally reject the people who are not like ready. So I have been through like the dating phase where I was still healing from the first relationship, where of course I wasn't ready. And then I've been through the phase where I think I have healed enough. Healing is a lifelong journey, but to date, but the other parties are not ready. So there's a phase of frustration, right? Where like, when is this going to happen? Especially when you get married at 23 and then you get separated in like 24-ish and 25 to now, and your parents are from a very conservative background, and they just want you to like forget about like those things and move on, and you're still not meeting someone. It can get very frustrating. So out of frustration, you start dating people vigorously to like, come on, like, you know.
Sure.
Yeah,
I get
so
it.
like you have these things. But I think currently I'm at the stage where like your final level, I don't think I've graduated yet because I've not met someone, but at least I know that I'm not, like this is not something that I'm going to like put my 100%.
Yeah. So this is super interesting, and actually I think this is probably a great learning opportunity for many people out there, because I think what you're describing is something that a lot of people describe as the final challenge of the relationship game. Okay, let's call it a game for now, because I think it's a good analogy. So we've kind of described the different levels. Thank you for sharing, by the way. I really appreciate that. So we've kind of described the levels already, where it's like, hey, you know, you go in first, you know, desperately wanting love and affection from someone. Then you try to control the situation to get what you want from someone. You perhaps mold them to the person you want them to be. Then you kind of realize that they're just very different, and you're like, you know, you kind of let go a bit. then you might want to try to create some systems. You're like, okay, next time I want that to happen, I'm gonna have a checklist. I'm gonna have my I don't wants and I do wants, my green flag, red flags, and then the next stage after that is like, okay, again, a little bit of apathy. It's like, you know what, it'll happen when it'll happen. I'm gonna let go. And I think right now the stage you're describing, and which I'm going to describe as the final challenge, so to speak. So then the final challenge, right, and the final level, I think, which is what you're talking about, is you actually want to love the individual instead of all these other variables around it, right? You're not going into a relationship because you're like saying like, hey, I have this missing hole in my heart and I have all these things I'm trying to fill it up with, this checklist that I want. I'm not trying to systematize this whole thing. I don't have any expectations of who they are and who they're going to be, but instead I'm just truly there loving this individual. Because everyone is going to change. Everyone's going to be a different person. We're all going to essentially be different every day, and we're not going to always be our best selves. Some days we're our selves, right? And the most important thing is, how do you then put yourself in a position where no matter what, you love the other person for who they are and what they are, no matter what they're doing, right? Because I think it's very easy for us, even in regular relationships, and I'm sure many people at home will feel this, is that, hey, you walk into a room and you're seeing your partner doing something and you're like, well, why are you doing that? Like, it's so different than what you would do. But instead of being immediately perhaps, aggressive about it, right? If you can actually put yourself in a perspective where you're curious, like, oh, why are they doing that, right? And then finally going to like, oh, wow, I love to have such a different perspective than me, that they do something so different, so out of my expectation, right? That it's actually beautiful, right? And then that part is where you can actually love the individual for who they are and what they're doing. And I think that is like the closest form to, I think, agape love. That is really, I believe, to be somewhat of the, hopefully the gold standard of love, right? Because it's not a love based on infatuation, which again we said fades, right? It's not a love based on cultural expectations, which is then external influences and not intrinsic, but it's one that you actually say, hey, I choose to be in this relationship. I choose to love this person for who they are, right? For their inner core self. And
I'm curious about it. It's the love based on curiosity.
And I'm curious,
God, I love it.
Yeah, and I'm curious that this person is so amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I understand. Yeah, I think I can totally relate, because when I use the apps, I've seen the different stages, and I have been in those stages as well. Like where I have had a checklist and all of that. But from my personal experience, I've seen people who are not completely ready. So where they are still figuring out like what they want. So that's one group of people. And then there's one who know that they need someone, but they have not done the inner work themselves. So they are looking at someone to complete them, like you mentioned, which is, again, not really exactly healthy, but you never know. Maybe they can meet the right person and they can help each other. And then we have a group, which unfortunately I have been meeting recently. Most of them are just focusing on their career, and they are mostly saying that they are going to be just waiting for magic to happen, right? Like they are waiting for that one person to come and change their perspective about marriage. But right now they are so busy and like so content with their career. So I don't think that's the right angle as well. So I think what I really see here is, I love this quote where you don't pray for the bus, and then you don't just pray for the bus, but you also run to catch the bus.
Yes, correct.
So you pray for it and you also run, right?
Yeah.
So what's happening here is all these Instagram quotes are like influencing people, like saying that, I was influenced at one point where, you don't chase love, it comes to you, it comes to you. And I was like, okay. And then I was in this phase, I'm not going to chase, it's going to come knocking on my door, or it will magically come in the apps. But then I realized that what I really like about Conrad, about what he shared and what he has personally shared with me as well, is like he loves to quantify his pool. Like he says that there are 20% chances that you meet them at your workplace, right? And there are 15% you meet them in your community, which is great. I think we need to have this kind of guide, and this is what's missing with in the dating scene, where people are focused in their career and they're waiting for the magic to happen. But if you want the magic to happen, you need to like kind of strategize for it. Yeah, I think that's important. Like it's not going to come to you. Yeah,
it's very interesting, and thanks for sharing that point too. Like, I think where I'm coming at is, I think a lot of people get discouraged when they go through these different stages in life. I know I was so discouraged after every stage, because you think you figured things out. Hey, I have a checklist. Hey, I can mold someone into the image of who I want.
Yes.
Right? And then you realize that doesn't work. You're like, oh, I'm so sad. My life is devastated because I thought that was the way to get a good relationship.
Yes.
Then you find your next thing. It's like, oh, I'm going to set up a checklist and I'm going to only filter and I'm going to have the people that I only want in my life become my partner.
Exactly.
And
that
realize,
comes from their past experiences.
Yes.
Where they feel like, okay, now I don't want this, I want that, right?
Yeah. But again, when that doesn't work, because inevitably people are different,
yes.
right? Even if they passed their criteria at the beginning, they will change, right? And then you might not even understand that your criteria actually wasn't the right criteria that you wanted. Maybe those aren't the things that actually make you happy. Maybe those things that you thought were green flags are actually red flags in disguise. You have no idea. But the thing is, again, you get devastated when systems don't work. And then you go to the next stage, like you said, people are just letting go. They're like, hey, you know what? Live and let go. Love will find me when it finds me. Again, are you really going to find the right partner just by randomly bumping into them? I think that's a lovely Disney story. I think there's so many good romance stories about this.
There's so many Instagram reels about it.
Yes.
People are like, wait for the right person. You only get it when you don't chase them. The universe works that way.
Yeah. But I think like a really good analogy here is like, as you said, you can pray for a bus, but you got to run for it too.
Of course.
And I think what I'm describing now is, the last stage is, and again, you will experience each stage as you go along in life. And hopefully the idea is that as you watch these episodes, as you read more books, as you imagine more perspectives, you can hopefully not have to go through all the different trials and tribulations.
And who
that we went
knows, you
through.
might just jump to the dating based on curiosity, right?
Maybe, right? And because you've actually lived through those experiences, through meditation, through understanding
and through your
process.
friends.
Sure.
Oh, yeah. So you don't have to go through everything.
Yeah. And ideally what you want to get to, at least for me, and I'm not going to say this is a gold standard. Again, I think you'd be happy at any stage in life. If you find the right partner at the right stage and you're both, at the same stage, I think that actually could be a very good relationship. But if you can actually, get to the stage where you're saying like, hey, you know what? I'm going to work for the relationship I want. I have a general understanding, right, of what are my green flags and red flags. They're not going to be the end all and be all, but they're definitely going to be something that I look at because you still have criteria. It's not like you're going to have anybody on the street become your partner, right? Let them into your life. There are still, certain filters that you do want to keep, right? But on top of that, where do you think you're going to find these people the most? And how open-minded are you to the fact that maybe someone just very different than you may have the potential to change the way you see the world.
Yes.
And you have a huge curiosity about that. And I'm not telling you guys to go into relationships where it's obviously bad, right? Abusers,
and be curious about abusive relationships.
I think maybe there's some things you don't need to be curious about. But the thing is, I think what's been very enlightening for me is, I've had situations where in the past, I maybe even yourself, right? You might have jumped to the conclusion that, hey, my partner isn't helping me take pictures and from Instagram, therefore bad partner, right? Or whatever you thought.
Or not the right fit.
Or not the right fit.
Yeah.
But ultimately, so they're not abusing you, they're not hurting you, right? At least in that instance. So therefore, there's opportunity for you to be curious about that. Oh, how come, they aren't, as interested in this activity as I am? How can I make this activity more interesting for them if possible? Or what other activities might they be doing that could also benefit me, right? There's so many ways to see it. But as I've grown up, as I've matured, it's been very obvious to me that a lot of things that I thought were so important back in the day when I was having my dating criteria are just simply irrelevant today, or at least are different perspectives. And I'm much more happier now knowing that there are different ways to tackle these challenges, and my life is just so much more fulfilled. So, long story short,
Sorry,
ideally,
just to add on to that, how much we love them to calibrate the expectations. Like, you are not a photo person, it's okay.
Yeah.
You are something else, like maybe you're more adventurous, you don't believe in documenting, it's okay, right? I will calibrate that. It's important to me, but let's talk about it and I'll calibrate my expectations. I think this comes with maturity as well.
Sure.
Yes.
But I think maturity is like a very simple way of saying it, right? It's like actually building up these foundational layers of saying like, hey, I am my own individual self. I love myself. I will do things for myself that make me happy. This partner isn't here to make me happy. I think that's the first thing you should always remember. Your partner isn't there to make you happy. You are there to make yourself happy. Your partner is there to complement your life, to add an additional lens to your life, additional flavor, so to speak. But it's not like you're supposed to go hungry without a partner. It shouldn't be that kind of like savage, raw desire, but rather it's something that will add to your life, that will make your life more rich and more whole. And 1 plus 1 ideally makes 11, I guess. Like that's the idea. Like greater than 2.
Okay, yeah. Get it.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand. It's like, I mean, I'm a foodie, so if you want to make a like analogy out of food, it's basically making it more nutritious.
Yeah.
Your partner is there to like add value to it, so it's more
Yeah.
nutritious. But you still have your balanced meal.
Yeah.
They just come in and they add
Or like,
more,
let's say you've never eaten this kind of veggie before, and they bring this veggie, and that veggie
Yes.
suddenly has so many nutrients that
And
you've
it's
never
good
even
for you.
experienced.
Yeah.
And so I think, like, maybe to close this off, I have a really, clear perspective on this, is that what we hope to do here in these conversations is to show you an honest kind of breakdown of how relationships and any other topic that we might cover happen. And so that we're not giving you advice that you're not ready for, right? And ideally, we're not even giving you advice, we're just sharing our experience and showing you how things kind of flowed for us and for many people that we know, within our community and our friend group. But what I want you to take away from this is that, hey, depending on the stage of life that you yourself find yourself in, the level that you're in, don't try to jump ahead, right? Until you solve the next stage, right? So right now, if you're someone that is like, hey, really trying to mold your partner to be the partner that you want, try to think about, what if a checklist could solve that, right? Think about a checklist. Think about how a checklist could help you in your dating experience, right? Think about if you had all these criteria, what would happen, and try it out, even in your mind,
Yes.
right? Or in real life. Try it, because you need to see to believe. Like, no matter if we say all these things, you might not believe it, and we don't want you to believe just blindly. Try it.
And we're not saying
Yeah.
that it's wrong to have a checklist. If you
Yeah.
have a checklist and it works for you, great. Right?
No, and I'm not saying it's wrong. There's nothing
Yeah,
right
there's
or wrong
nothing
at
wrong.
all here. I'm
Exactly.
saying that these are just simply phases that we've went through. I still have a checklist. I'm gonna be honest. Like I said, it's not like you're not gonna have none of the previous things, but there are foundational layers for you to learn what you need to do next. I've learned that I can't change someone, so I'm never gonna try to change someone again. Am I gonna accidentally want to? Sure, right? But I'm gonna try my best not to. I've learned that a checklist is helpful for me to maintain some sort of, filter, some sort of understanding about who I'm gonna date. Am I gonna stick to that and that's gonna be only end all and be all? No, I'm not gonna have that be my only thing, right? I realize that I need to take care of myself and love myself. Does that mean I'm only gonna love myself? I'm not gonna put any time and attention to having anyone else in my life? No, of course not, right? Again, I need to know how to do that to then move to the next stage. The next stage is, I know that I, need to be, curious and, excited and, really looking into, someone's perspective in life, right? And I think that is like really the whole end journey, right? Where it's like, hey, you are always going to be the sum of your levels. You're going to be the sum of all your experiences. And you need to understand it to some level of degree so that you know in that next stage how to operate in a way that is not just simply, following advice and not really understanding why it's working and why it's not. And if you want to learn more about this, we have an amazing website over at x3.family where we've broken down all these levels and talked about all these different, life aspects, right? Life topics that are applicable to the levels theory to help you understand, what you're motivated by in each stage of life, how you can navigate that, and what kind of knowledge, tools, or community resources can help you, move on and, be on top of your level, be your best self, and hopefully level up.
Yes, and who knows, maybe you have your own way of life, which is actually what we are doing here, which is levels theory, but it's your own framework. If it is, they should share it with us.
Yeah, let us know how you think about life. We want to know.
So, curious, please.
Stay curious.
That's all.
Yes. All right.
Peace out.
Lovely. Bye-bye.